Hello, biology students, and today we're going to talk about the amazing properties of water. Water really truly is amazing, and some of the reasons for that: water is polar. We're going to talk about what that means. It resists temperature change, and water expands when it freezes. Those don't maybe sound very exciting, but they have really amazing implications. First, let's talk about polarity. What is polarity? It just means having opposite charges. Two opposing things are polar. Water is a polar molecule, and that's because the oxygen in the water molecule tends to pull negative charge towards itself, and so it is partially negative. The hydrogens, on the other hand, they're a little bit positive because the electrons are being pulled away from them. So water is polar because one side of the water molecule is slightly negative, and then it's over on this side where the hydrogens are, it's slightly positive. Now, an important point to notice or to remember is that like things dissolve like. Like dissolves like. So polar molecules will dissolve polar molecules. Non-polar molecules will dissolve non-polar molecules. Polar molecules, therefore, are attracted to other polar molecules. And because of that, we have a very interesting phenomenon called capillary action. And let's look at what that is. Capillary action is something that happens to be the result of this polarity of water. And the definition of capillary action is simply the tendency of liquids to rise or be depressed in tubes of small diameter. And I'm sure you've noticed this before. Maybe you haven't put a name on it. But right here we have capillary action in a diagram, an illustration. You can see that the diameter of the tube certainly affects the capillary action. Right here we have a larger diameter tube, and here's a very tiny diameter tube, and you can see the height that the water rises in that. It's able to climb up or seep up, however you want to term that, up this tube because of adhesion of the liquid to the sides of the tube. These are other examples of it. Right here we have water showing us capillary action there. Here is a picture of mercury showing capillary action, and in this case it's depressed instead of elevated or risen. Here is an example of capillary action as water is wicking up a paper towel, and it happens to be also carrying ink with it, pigments. So someone has put some marker, some ink, some pigments on the paper towel, and when that paper towel is just put into the water on the very edge, the water will rise up the paper towel and carry those pigments along with it. And again, this is due to adhesion. In this case, the water is adhering to the paper towel. Here's another example, and you may have tried this with carnations or seen this experiment done where the plant is placed in some liquid, some water that has dye in it. And here's some celery stalks that are placed in the red dye, and you can see what happens. That capillary action is showing as the dye wicks up the plant, and you can see it expressed in the leaves. Next, let's talk about water resisting temperature change. This is a very important property. Water, because it resists temperature change, water requires a huge amount of heat in order to increase its temperature. A lot of energy has to go into the water for the temperature to rise, and conversely, water loses a tremendous amount of heat when it cools. That's compared to other substances, other liquids. Water, when it cools down, loses a huge amount of heat. Why do we care? Well, it's really important because it allows organisms to maintain homeostasis. If organisms the temperature fluctuated wildly and rapidly within an organism that is made mostly of water, it would not be able to maintain homeostasis very well, and it'd be very difficult to maintain a life and to function. So this resistance to temperature change is a really important feature of water, and it's very important to all living organisms. Last, water expands when it freezes. This is a really important quality of water, and we see evidence of this in a lot of places. First, let's just talk about frost wedging. Frost wedging would be where water fills a crack of a rock or cement. I mean, you probably notice this effect on roads a lot. When the water freezes, it turns to ice, expands, and it actually breaks that rock or puts a crack in that cement. And so it's actually an amazingly powerful thing that happens when the water freezes. Another aspect to this is that because water expands when it freezes rather than contracting like most other liquids do, water becomes less dense when it is ice. So in the form of a solid, we have a less dense substance than we do the liquid. And what happens, and what is exciting about that, is the ice floats on top of the liquid water. And this is important because ponds and lakes are insulated in the winter because of that layer of ice on the top. And the fish and the organisms that live inside those ponds, they're able to survive throughout the winter. That's just one of the many benefits to that property of water. Advanced proficiency. Just some different ideas for you. Compare and contrast adhesion and cohesion. What are those? What is surface tension? What is hydrogen bonding? And what role does that play in the properties of water? Those are some exciting questions you can answer. And I'm looking forward to see what kinds of answers you come up with. Let's see you in class.